You're calling from a 519 area code. Who's this?
Oh, hello.
Hello? Who's
Is
this?
this me?
Yes.
Ah, perfect. All right, great. My name is Chris from Ontario.
Hello, Chris. Knew you were
I
Canadian.
called you guys once. I am a Canadian.
Knew it.
And I'm going to see what the phone bill is like. But anyway, worth it. So I called you guys once back in August, I think, about Civil War and cucks. And since
I
the
do
Civil War
remember
is-
this call. Yes,
You're
I had
like an
threatened
actual scholar.
to do a podcast around you.
Yeah, I sent you guys an email, but I guess it got lost in the mail, so to speak. I mean, things did kind of explode after August.
Yes,
so
indeed.
with the late unpleasantness.
We all got cooked.
But anyway, sorry?
Sorry.
Oh, I just missed that, sorry. Anyway, so I wanted to give you guys a call because of Professor Trump, should I say, his comments on the Civil War, very incisive observations. And it's actually pretty interesting beyond kind of the basic observations I think people have been making about it. I mean, you know, on the floor level of it, obviously he's an idiot. And spoiler alert, Jackson was dead long before the Civil War started. But what's interesting is he's really participating in a really larger kind of historiographical conversation about the Civil War, which is really relevant to conservatism today, I think at least. And you can kind of trace it back to the kind of the mythology of the war itself, right? So right at the end of the Civil War, and I mean like right after, like before the Confederacy is even properly surrendered, when Lee surrenders to General Grant at Appomattox, one of the observers, Russell from the London Times, writes a really amazing editorial about it. And he writes that this extraordinary surrender demonstrates that America might be a great nation, and in fact might be the greatest of all nations. It's quite an admission from the London Times, which was pretty much pro-Confederate, anti-Union for the entire war. But he based it on the supposition that the surrender is a gentleman's agreement, that that Lee has very willingly acquiesced to the Union, and the country will be reconstructed. And it's based on a lie. In actual point of fact, there's nothing gentlemanly about the surrender at Appomattox. Lee is trying to position Grant to help him recreate a Union where Virginia's still in charge, and in turn, Grant is trying to position Lee in a position where he is going to help reform the South. So they're really following the first salvos of what's going to become the Reconstruction conflict. But what's amazing is this mythology really actually creates a reconstructed Union. I would argue, at least, the key to Reconstruction is the shared belief that no one was wrong in the Civil War. The most amazing example of this was General Gordon, who was a Klansman, leader of the United Confederate Veterans, who famously said at a major multiple armies reunion, when the Union veterans were complaining about pro-Confederate histories becoming the standard in the South, complained that his brothers in arms in the North would try to dismiss the Southern history and insisted, "My friends in the late conflict, you were right, but so were we." And then this mythology metastasizes into what's called the avoidable war thesis. And the avoidable war thesis is basically that bumbling politicians or a tyrannical Lincoln or conniving abolitionists forced the war unnecessarily, that slavery was dying of natural causes. The war was completely, basically unnecessary. And this idea really comes to fruition in the 20th century, because this is, of course, the First World War. And in the wake of the First World War, it's really popularized that this war shouldn't have happened. And it fits really well into this broader narrative. Of course, the war wasn't over slavery because the South weren't bad guys and the North weren't bad guys, and everybody just got confused, and we made a big mistake, and it shouldn't have happened. And to create this memory, the requirement is that the black memory of the war needs to be discarded. We don't talk about black regiments that fought. We don't talk about slavery. When we do, we make slavery out to be a very positive and good thing, or at least a benign thing, or something that was going to die, something that didn't need to be destroyed. So when Trump participates in this, it's part of that. Sorry.
Well, I mean, so is the argument that that the no one was at fault was necessary for the Union to come together, or for the country to come together, or was just simply a byproduct of what? Like, I mean, was it necessary to lead to a sort of an end to the conflict?
Yes and no. There's a couple of different arguments about this. Gregory P. Downs has recently written an amazing book, After Appomattox, which and I would agree with this argument, if you actually wanted to racially reconstruct the Union, truly remake it, you would have had to have had a military garrison occupying the South for at least several decades, like full-on military occupation, basically a continuing war. If you want to have peaceful reconciliation, I would say what you need is acquiescence on the part of the South. And I think a major part of that comes from the mythology they're able to construct. We weren't the bad guys, and you never really beat us. We were just overpowered.
Right.
And so that it's not necessarily like, a government, edict was we're going to just rewrite the Civil War history, but it allowed the South to acclimatize. And the trick about Civil War mythology, and this is just my opinion, but what's really fascinating about it is other periods of history of Civil War, say the Vendée in the French Revolution, or the socialists in the Spanish Civil War, they're not really allowed to survive when they lose. And they're certainly allowed to thrive and write their history. But in a weird change of the old pattern, the South is allowed to write their history. The former governor of Virginia, Henry Wise, who was a radical, fire-eating Southerner, was so bold to say, one civil war is always followed by a second. He could say this freely. And he fully expected round two. Confederates were allowed to write their own pro-Confederate narrative. Jefferson Davis, the traitor president, is released from prison, and he's allowed to write The Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government, this ridiculous, rambling 2,000-page treatise on why it wasn't about slavery and why I'm a good guy. Kind of hypocritical since he openly declared it was about slavery in 1861, but, details. But that's what's fascinating. The Confederate memory is allowed to live, but that's the key of Lincoln's amnesty policy. He wanted to see as few people killed as possible. It is amazing that a war that
it's
kills
a big
750,000 people have 3 executions.
Face-saving
Right?
face-saving measures. I have to say, it reminds me, and I hate to reduce everything to Clint Eastwood movies, but this is very much consistent with Josie Wales, with the outlaw Josie Wales.
It kind of reminds me of what the guy was saying yesterday, actually.
Outlaw Josie Wales, of course, he doesn't surrender, and in the end, he is allowed to just go live in peace, and walks into the sun for the first time.
And it's funny that
Was
you
it
bring
also though?
Hold on, wait a second. I'm getting his
On Josie,
reaction to Josie Wales.
Can we? Okay, I wanted to link it to yesterday,
Well,
but go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's interesting you bring up, because I haven't seen that. I haven't watched a lot of Clint Eastwood, I have to admit. But from what I know of them, from the Westerns, what's interesting you bring that up, because the Western genre in general is a good analogy for this. If you watch these old Westerns, the Civil War is always a thing that happened. It's the late unpleasantness. A thing happened, like take True Grit. Turns out, okay, one of them's an ex-Confederate who was a partisan ranger, and one of them was a regular soldier in Richard Taylor's Army of the Red River, right? At least I think. He implies he was. But it's a thing that happened. We're not going to talk about it. It's just a thing that we all experience.
With Josie Wales, his whole fight against the Union was a function of the Redlegs, of the regiments that went in that were supposedly specifically oriented towards burning down Southern civilian houses and whatnot.
Yeah. The sounds like either Jayhawkers or Sherman's men.
But is
Sorry,
this?
go on.
But yesterday, the professor who we had on yesterday, talking about conservative parties and democracy, was also talking first, about how aristocratic parties establish bases in democracy, but then you were talking about basically in transition periods, how do you accommodate the old regimes in some sense in order to create a new political state? So is there some analogy with that?
Totally. Yeah, hugely analogous. Because the major part of the Civil War, and I didn't want to get into the causation because, you guys don't have like 5 hours to talk about that, but a major part of what people don't get is it's to preserve slavery, but there's several reasons why they want to preserve slavery. And a key one is because the South is trying to preserve basically political hegemony in the United States. The majority of former presidents were all Southrons, slave owners. The few that weren't were called dough-faces, which basically meant that they were Northern but supported Southern views. The South dominated Supreme Court. The South dominated legislation. The South dominated the whole system. And in the South itself, the elite slave class made the state legislatures. South Carolina, they chose the presidential election.
Why did the South dominate? Why did the South dominate so much?
There's a couple reasons for that. A big part of it is the 3/5 clause, which gave them overrepresentation in the House. And a major part of it is that's where the money was. The money in America before the Civil War is coming from the South. The South was so wealthy that if you include the slaves, who obviously not making much money. That's 4 million people. Include them, your average Southron is making about 2/3 of a Yankee. But remember, Yankees actually are free laborers. So even including slaves, they're making that much.
Wow.
In the great economic recession of 1857, as I'm going to forget his name now, it's really embarrassing, Senator Hammond declared, we have come, people of the North, we have come with 4 billions, I think it was 4 billions anyway, of wagons of cotton, and we have saved you, for cotton is king. They're the economic powerhouse. And they were the old Southern leadership. They were it was kind of assumed the South should be in charge in a lot of ways, as weird as that sounds. But that's kind of where it's hard to trace exactly when it happens, but a lot of it has to do with the money. Because really, between the Revolution and industrialization, the North is kind of at a weird transitionary point, and their economy is not as strong. It's after the Civil War, when the Southern economy is ravaged by it and their whole social system is upheaved, that we get a succession of Northern presidents right up until Woody Wilson.
Interesting.
So that's a big part of it. But it's mostly because the Three-Fifths Clause overrepresented slave power, and slave casts themselves were the richest people in America. So the original question about the preserving power. So basically, in many respects, it's a Jim McPherson actually calls the whole Civil War, the fighting part of it, a preemptive counter-revolution. It's the Ancien regime realizing things are about to change because we have a country bumpkin, anti-slavery candidate no one's ever heard of, and now he's the president on an anti-slavery platform. So clearly the regime's can change. We don't get to pick the president anymore, so we're going to make our own country where we get to stay in charge. When the war is over, there is this radical period where they try to tear the whole damn thing down. The first black governors in U.S. history are in Virginia, Mississippi. The first black senator is going to take the seat from Mississippi once held by the Honorable Jeff Davis. Things are turned on their head.
Yeah, you're only going to get about 15 years of that.
Yeah, well, it didn't last very long. It was really only about 5 years of solid Reconstruction where we have black people in charge, and basically being the first competent leaders of those states probably since the history of the Union.
Those were the worst years in our history.
Jeff Sessions, I'd love to hear his opinion on the matter.
The horrible. We call those the tragic times.
We call those the years that Cotton cried tears of pain.
I call that the knob.
We call those the dark years, if you understand what I'm saying.
See, I'm a member of a certain secret society.
Well, it's funny because that's a huge part of it. With the Ku Klux Klan, if you ever read Woodrow Wilson's writings, as he was a historian before he became president, he writes really incisive, and I mean not incisive as in correct, incisive as in just, if nothing else, what's the word I'm looking for? Very helpful essay in understanding this white Southern kind of view of this. He writes an essay about the Ku Klux Klan as the secret defenders of the South, who exist by necessity because they must use extra legal means to maintain the social order. That is how he sees the Klan.
A homosexual, but a brilliant homosexual, Woodrow Wilson.
Too bad it's Mick Paul. All right.
Jeff Sessions' view of it.
I got to jump.
Probably would be that.
Fascinating stuff. Thanks so much for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hi, folks. It's Sam Seder. You know me from just a minute ago. Listen, we've had a problem on YouTube. Let me make a graphic visualization. Back in March, our revenue and the ads that were monetized was a lot, like here. And now, over the course of actually within a day into April, it's down to about here. Now, this is just a artist rendering, but that's basically it. We were here, and now we're here. That's because of some YouTube thing where advertisers were concerned on being on hate sites. And of course, we're a news organization that sometimes talks about hateful people, and we got caught up in their algorithm. I thought it would be fixed by now. It's not. We need your help to keep giving you free content on YouTube. We don't have the advertiser support that we had even back, here. So we're looking for your help. Go to our Patreon site, give a couple of bucks. Literally, you could give a couple, and it would be very helpful. Head over there. Here's the link right here or down there. It's somewhere around here. find it and go help us out. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the show.